Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining me for my Event Talk with the Experts panel discussion today at Event Talk Live. I'm very excited to be joined once again by Melinda Burdette from Meeting Professionals International, as well as Kate Patay from Patay Consulting. Thank you both for being with us here today. We hope you've enjoyed over the course of the event. We hope you enjoyed the fireside chat, the networking opportunities, and of course, Big Head Cartoon Caricatures. Big shout out to them for that awesome party. A little bit of a break between sessions. And then, of course, I also wanted to remind everyone that we will be sending out these session recordings after the event, as well as the Future of Hybrid Events survey results. So you will be getting those tomorrow in your email. So without further ado, I'd like to get this panel discussion started. So before we get started, Melinda, I know you already did this in your fireside chat, but just for anyone who may have joined us a little bit late, can you both introduce yourselves and just give us a brief background of your history and events, starting with Melinda?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So glad to be here. My name is Melinda Burdette. I am Director of Events for Meeting Professionals International. As far as my background in events, I was very young when I started doing this. I've had several careers, both in association planning on the medical side of things, on the corporate side of things. Did a little bit of a stint with the Atlanta Braves. And then, if you had asked me way back in the day when I first started planning meetings, if I would, as my CEO says it, be the head chef for head chefs, I would have said absolutely not. But I'm thrilled to be able to be in the position that I'm in, and it certainly provides challenges for us to keep our game up year over year. So that's always a challenge that I embrace as well.
Well, and I am Kate Patay with Patay Consulting. I've been doing this a handful of years myself as well. I hate admitting that I've just hit the 25-year mark, but I started when I was 9 years old. We're going to go with that. So I do brand strategy and event consulting, work across the globe on it. Right now we've got some fun upcoming ones between BizBash and some of the others. I've just attended WEC, which Melinda had planned. It was an amazing event. And I chair the Search Foundation, which is for event professionals in crisis, and sit on the ambassador committee for Meetings Mean Business. So I like to be very involved with our industry. And I love the fact, too, that some of Christina's music from Big Head was still playing for everybody. Guys, fun fact, I went to high school together. This is such a small world that we operate in, our event community. So I'm glad everyone enjoyed the Big Head cartoon break that we had.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. So earlier during the fireside chat, we talked about some of the metrics and statistics we got from our hybrid event survey, which we ran in June and July. But we also asked an open-ended question in that survey, and I want to share a few of the answers to that question with the audience. And the question is, the question of the year, it feels like, how do you define a hybrid event? And so I'm going to go through some of the answers that our survey respondents gave, and then I'm going to ask both of you that same exact question. So we have a lot of different ideas of what a hybrid event looks like. So this person says it's an event where there are in-person booths and virtual booths. Both have the ability for participants to download and receive content and engage with sponsors. There are sessions that can be accessed in person and virtually, with Q&A that can be submitted by virtual attendees and in-person attendees. So essentially a simultaneous experience for our offline and our online attendees. The second definition we got was someone who says, I see perhaps one live event and then quarterly virtual events, focused on specific topics. The live event should be focused on live interaction. So this idea of having them kind of broken up into two different concepts. This one also said primarily separate events with dedicated virtual offerings as opposed to strictly live stream. And then the last one, full all year, always event, pre-event virtual aspects that encourage the day of the event attendance, virtual and live aspects during the event that provide meaningful content and encourage post-event engagement. So after seeing all of that, it's pretty clear that we don't have a set definition for hybrid events. So I'm going to start with Kate. What is your definition of a hybrid event?
hybrid's a way in which you can make sure that you're engaging people in real life and through the virtual medium. I think we're still figuring out what that looks like. And I do think it's going to be different for the coming year versus what the future of it's going to be, because we're, that pent up demand that people talk about, that they're all racing back to in real life right now and to be together. It's going to look different a year out as we get our feet back under us again, but figuring out ways that you can engage both audiences and connect them with each other.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Melinda, same question. How do you define a hybrid event?
Yeah, I mean, MPI defines a hybrid event as that simultaneous event going on at the same time where you're engaging both an in-person and a virtual audience, and then you can take it further, say, that be happening all year periodically. Absolutely. I mean, I agree with all of the elements that everyone had for their definitions, because you can define hybrid events in so many different ways. And then from a digital aspect, just from a digital aspect, are you going to pre-record that content for that digital audience, or are you going to live stream, or are you going to content capture? I mean, so once you start getting into the weeds, you can really decide what path you're going to go down. But hybrid is what you make of it. But it is an opportunity to have the same education being delivered to both an in-person and a virtual audience.
Mm-hmm. And can we touch on hybrid too? Should have the piece that makes it more engaging. If you just put a camera in and you're streaming a stage,
Correct.
It's not hybrid. We've seen that stamped on here and there. So I'll be the first to fall on that sword and be like, you can't call yourself hybrid if it's one fixed camera streaming. That's a live stream then.
That's a live stream. Yep. Yeah, let's make sure that's very clear. Hybrid means interactivity, right? You have to have that interaction or the opportunity to interact. Whether anyone engages in it or not, that's their deal. But you must have that interaction.
Cool. Oh, I love that. So hybrid means interactive. Hybrid means engagement, not just a straight live stream, because that's just broadcasting. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And actually, speaking of engagement, I want to remind our audience that after this discussion ends at 3:40 p.m. Eastern time, we're actually going to jump into a workshop session where you'll have the opportunity to ask Kate and Melinda your questions live and face-to-face. So you'll be able to turn your camera on, just like you were able to do if you jumped into one of those workshops during the 30-minute break. So keep an eye out for that. Once we end here, we'll go over into that session and you'll have a chance to ask them your questions live and in real time. All right, so jumping right in here, I wanted to start with Melinda, because MPI was one of the very first organizations to jump into the world of hybrid events back in 2020 with WEC Grapevine. What made MPI comfortable hosting hundreds of event professionals live in person in the middle of a pandemic?
You used the word comfortable. I'm not sure that we were ever comfortable. I think that, there were so many unknowns, but for us, as MPI and part of the reason that we are the organization that we are is so we take the risk, right? So that everyone else can learn from what it is that we're doing. So I wouldn't say that I was ever 100% comfortable going into WEC Grapevine in the middle of a pandemic. But we made it as safe as possible as we could make it during the pandemic, prior to vaccinations, prior to all of those kinds of things. And just really structured it. The difference between how we approached Grapevine last November and how we approached Vegas this past June was that Grapevine meeting was really scaled to the digital audience. So when you think about like a Saturday Night Live set, that's the way that we approached the delivery of what we were doing in Grapevine. And our numbers reflected that. We had almost 1,200 people on the digital side of things in Grapevine and about 600 people on site in person. Well, that was flip-flopped for Vegas. So we had, 1,200 people live and 600 people or 700 people digitally. So your focus changed a little bit. So we really created that experience for the in-person audience, and then added that digital element to it. So it's how you originate in it. The level of comfort is just trying to manage the roller coaster ride that we've all been on for the past 2 years, and trying to manage how you approach that and how you create. You're never going to create a completely safe bubble for your attendees, but you can create a safer environment for them to be able to gather in. And I think that we obviously accomplished that in both situations.
Wonderful.
Kate, how did you feel about it? You joined us in Vegas.
I did. I was an attendee. I've had a great time being an attendee to a lot of events. I feel like we need to be the thought leaders here. This is our job for the industry to figure out how do we safely reopen, how do we continue to connect people, and how do we make sure everyone's comfortable in the decision that they make, whether they're joining in virtually or in real life. And you guys did nail it. I felt safe the entire time. So kudos to you and the MPI team on that. It's an interesting dynamic, like I said, as we're coming back into this. And I've been on the planning side of about a half a dozen events so far. And then I've attended about a dozen just to kind of gauge. I think it's a study in people constantly. What are the pain points? What do we need to overcome? Things on paper that we're looking at, we're saying, oh, this is a great solution. When you see them actually play out, sometimes it's a little different based on human nature. So getting to experience that firsthand, I think that's how we are going to drive forward. We're not through anything yet. Things still exist. We are still technically in a pandemic here. So figuring out how do we do it safely, that's what it's up to us to do, because it's not going to go away. So what does this new event look like? How do we safely bring people together still, knowing that what's out there and what we have to deal with, and do it in a safe way, a safe manner? And you know what? Whatever you choose to do, I'm also okay with. I think that's our job as well, is to spread that messaging that if you're not comfortable to come in person, that's okay. We can get you all that information online. And if you are here in person, whether you're comfortable with hugs, whether you're comfortable with, fist bumps, or if you want to keep your full 6 feet, embrace and accept that too. That new sort of etiquette for how we meet is so important, and just respecting where everyone's coming from. If you're not ready yet, that's okay. You don't need to come yet. We'll still find a way to connect. But if you're ready to help drive it forward and figure out what it looks like, then yes, be there in person, join this, help move us all forward.
Absolutely. And Kate, that actually leads really well into the next question I had for you, because you're talking about making sure that everyone feels comfortable and meeting people where they're at in terms of their own comfort. And I think that means a lot of the times making sure that we don't leave one of our audiences behind. So if we're focusing on our in-person audience, we can't leave our virtual audience behind, and vice versa. So I know that you recently helped out with BizBash at Connect in Las Vegas back in May. As an MC. Can you talk a little bit about the experience of emceeing to a virtual audience from a live offline event, and how it kind of differed from some of your emceeing experiences in the past?
Talking to two audiences simultaneously is always interesting. And if that's the road you're going down, I think the event producers need to make sure that they're always catering to that piece with, not only miking and camera placement, but how do you also connect with that virtual audience, but not lose the audience that's sitting in front of you face to face on that side. So, it was great experience. I had a blast with it. We had incredible engagement on that side. We're moving forward with Tampa in August that is going to have the same style of component. And based on how that played out and the feedback, we've adjusted some of the staging, the cameras, what the AV and everything looks like for it to really make it more interactive on that side. We're just going to keep getting better at this. That's what we need to do. And every single event I go to, I see us getting markedly better every single time. But it was interesting. It's always good to see too, people are sitting in the rooms different. They're engaging different, and making sure we're building in more networking time for people. That was one of my favorite parts of MPI that we just had at Caesars Forum, was the hallway conversations. We could have just set up a giant hallway and everyone would have been happy with that event. We got to see each other again. And I see some questions coming in too on what it felt like to be hybrid with it, but then also making sure that the people felt safe that were in the room. We did make sure that there were vaccinations that were uploaded, which I know is a hot button topic. And if this is what it's going to take for us to be safe, you either had to be vaccinated or you had to have a negative PCR test within 72 hours. In Vegas, there was testing on site as well. And there will be some of those options moving forward, and then showing who's vaccinated. If you weren't, you did have to wear a mask. And, the precautions are going to keep changing, but I think let's err on the side of caution and I would rather be overly safe than try and just go 100% right away and potentially set us back more.
Got it. Thank you for that. And so you both mentioned that you've helped out with and or attended a few hybrid events over the last couple of years. And Melinda, you went and did WEC from hybrid with a mostly virtual audience to hybrid with a mostly offline audience. So the next few questions are going to be for both of you, just about kind of all of those experiences. So Melinda, what health precautions did you take for offline attendees at WEC, Grapevine, and Vegas? And did that change between those two events?
Yeah, it changed a little bit. We were the first to come up with the duty of care associated with the in-person events because, we needed to be able to create that safer bubble. So this was in Grapevine. It was obviously prior to vaccination. So you had a health, like a 5-question health assessment that you had to answer every morning. And you would either get a thumbs up, thumbs down, or question mark, I think is what it was. And that's just depended on how you answered the questions. If you had been exposed to COVID or if you had traveled internationally, that might have given you that we're not really sure, we need to ask you some more question type of situation. And then everyone got temperature checked in both locations. And so we did the same thing in Vegas. And then we also had an on-site medical clinic where we had testing available. So if you had to get a test, like we had some of our friends to the north in Canada attend Vegas, and they had to have a certain type of test in addition to that. And then if anyone was feeling bad on site, they could go to the medical clinic. It wasn't just about a COVID clinic. It was about cuts and scrapes and blisters on your feet because no one was show ready at that point. We forget how big Vegas is and how big all the venues are, and the fact that we've been sitting in our houses and only walking the 1,500 square feet or the 700 square feet that you may live in, at that point. So being show ready is something to be advised as well. We did have in Grapevine that was different, one way in and one way out of our education rooms. We did not do that in Vegas. It wasn't as necessary in Vegas. Masks were also optional in Vegas. So if you were vaccinated, and we did this on the honor system, you could go without a mask. If you didn't feel comfortable with that, then wear your mask. We're not gonna say don't wear a mask. Just again, it's your comfort level and where you are as a person at that point. Wearing Grapevine masks were mandatory. We even had signs, lollipop signs that said "Mask up, y'all," that the staff could use to help remind everyone that if you weren't actively eating or drinking, you need to be having your mask on. We physically distanced our seating in both locations. Again, we just felt that it was the safest way to approach that, which just means you need twice the amount of space. Luckily, the Caesars Forum, which is brand new, has more space than you can imagine. So it accommodated. I promise you that with 1,200 people there, we used every square inch of it. But again, that was the comfort level. Now, people pulled chairs up. Like Kate said, we could have just opened it all up and had a bunch of lounge areas sat around, and everyone would have come away from that meeting very, very happy. But we did, again, deliver world-class education at WEC, both for the digital audience and the in-person audience. So, overall, it was a very successful program. And from a duty of care, again, you just have to mitigate against that fear level of someone attending your meeting, because that's really what if you're doing all the things right associated with what the CDC says or who says, or where you're going from a venue standpoint and a city standpoint, you've just got to figure out where that fear factor is for your attendees and be transparent in the plans that you're trying to accomplish in order to make them feel safe. Because we're going to go through 22 with that same level of fear as companies and as associations start traveling more, because there's been bans on travel by companies and by other folks. So you're still going to have to mitigate against that as we move through 22.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. That's a lot of details for our audience to get an idea of what kind of health precautions they should be taking when they're setting up their events. Kate, the next one I'd like to direct to you because of your role emceeing at Biz Bash at Connect and at the other events that you've helped with this past year. How do you make virtual attendees feel connected to the experience?
Mm-hmm. It's an uphill battle at times. In full transparency, I told you I was going to jump on this and be frank. I think it's easier for us in person to connect someone virtual, to make them feel like they're part of it versus the other way around, because once people are in person, to get them back in front of a screen is the biggest uphill battle. So we're really mastering it as far as making sure that if you're on your screen watching, you feel like you're part of that. Gosh, so many different options, making sure that you can, get the Q&A out to them, that you've got the right camera angles to make virtual feel more connected. We're making sure that we have VIP rooms that are available for Q&A with speakers after the fact. If you can't be in that room raising your hand, how can we still give you a great VIP experience? So doing those one-on-ones, having a whole on-demand library, making sure that there's the sessions that you can see that are streaming from it, that you're live, you're there in person, but then giving you those options after the fact to consume all of that information on your own, how you feel best to do it and when you have the most time. I mean, that's the most difficult part for all of us right now, is finding the time to be a part of all of these. So the fact that we can put it all on demand and have that library of content has been huge. But there's so many different ways and all these awesome platforms that you guys have now of how we can connect them and making sure there's good networking, that, you've got led discussions still, so people feel like they're still there as if they had been there in person. We're just going to keep getting better, you guys. I see the chat blowing up too. Keep dropping your ideas in. Like, what do you see and what do you like? What have you been, witnessing that's a big win on that side? We're just going to keep learning by doing it. So I'm always open to hear from everyone that's watching as well. What's a win? What are we hitting it out of the park with?
Yeah, when we talked at the fireside earlier, it was about the fact that our digital audience had a tremendous amount of FOMO, right? That fear of missing out. They wanted to be able to be in person, but unfortunately, some of them couldn't travel due to travel restrictions within their corporations or within their country. So and yet we found that our in-person audience didn't really care about interacting with the digital audience. They wanted to interact with the person that was sitting next to them or across the room. So again, I think that's a trend for right now. So we have to work harder at that interaction between the in-person and the digital audience and trying to figure out what's going to be best. Because like we said at the very beginning, throwing a camera in the back of the room is not going to work. But you have to think about the staffing associated with having that Q&A or that chat available for both audiences, and make sure that your MC or your moderator, the speaker, is comfortable in that situation, and making sure that you're having them be included in that. So there's still a lot to learn. We haven't perfected it yet because it's an ever-changing opportunity. But yeah, I'd love to see and hear what other people are doing to make sure that they continue that engagement.
Yeah, make sure your MC knows to read the downstage monitor. Right? I've run into that so many times. I love my downstage monitors and my prompts, and you see people like, there were 10 questions. So, prepping on that side. And not everyone has trained for this. Not every person that goes out and stands on a stage knows inherently to do that. This is new to people. So to make sure that you're setting them up for success as well, and giving them all of those proper prompts, that's a big piece of it too.
Well, I was saying this backstage too. It's a totally different experience speaking to a virtual audience versus speaking to an offline audience. And I've learned so much just about cameras and lighting in the last 6 months to a year while putting together these virtual events. It's almost like I'm learning how to be a broadcast journalist at some points. And
I
that's
didn't know what I didn't know. And
Yeah.
that was part of the problem. You know, when we decided to flip the switch and go hybrid for Grapevine and move the date and do all the things, you know, that we were doing to prepare for moving from June to November, I had a lot of schooling that I needed to do. And while you might think that that's a little bit on the strange side, you know, that sort of webinar type of situation is run by a different department. But because it was part of WEC, now I needed to bring myself up to speed so that I could speak the tech speak. And I could talk to our speakers about that engagement, and we could talk to our sponsors about how we could help them be successful on both platforms and those kinds of things. So it wasn't just that I could rely on a different business unit within MPI. I needed to be able to talk the talk as well. So I mean, I had to gather education about it as well. So don't be afraid. I'm an old dog. I learn new tricks. So don't be afraid of that kind of thing.
No, change is the only constant right now. And that's where the true great planners are standing out, of how they're adaptable and flexible and they're just rolling with it. You know, we have so much coming our way, and it is fun. It is like being a broadcast journalist now. We're having a blast with it though.
I'm thinking that maybe in my next career, maybe I'll become an event producer, right? And be the headset person. And, you know, I've always been really great behind the scenes and things like that, trying to contain that chaos, you know, so that your in-person attendees don't see that. But calling a show and those kinds of things, I kind of liked it. So, you know, who knows? The world is our oyster at this point.
It is. We get to adapt. We get to change on all of those pieces. And, you know, frankly, guys, our jobs are a lot harder right now because we're essentially planning two separate events. You know, you're planning a full event that's virtual. You're planning a full event that's in real life. And now you've got this component of hybrid. How do you merge them together? So I guess it's more like almost 3 events, because it is full on planning, you know, for the events I have upcoming. I've got them completely separate in one area. Like, here's my virtual, here's how they engage, here's my in-person, you know, and then you all of a sudden have to build this bridge with it all. So our jobs are more just complex than they've ever been.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
2 budgets, 2 agendas, you know, potentially 2 sets of speakers, delivering everything live. That's how MPI has approached it. Is even from a digital standpoint, if we didn't live stream a room, then we had a speaker go into a green room and deliver that live to the digital audience. So, you know, it's not about, you have to think about other ways that you can deliver that education live if that's important to you. Is it risky? Heck yeah, it's risky. But at the same time, again, you need to show that it can be done. And you know, we feel that live presentations, live Q&A is the way to go.
Oh gosh, yeah. And I'm changing all of the formats on any of the ones that I'm doing, you know, that short, sweet, to the point. We are so over contented. We have so much content at our fingertips every single day. So figuring out how you really get to the meat and bones of that, you know, I don't have a single 60-minute session anywhere. I found that sweet spot for engagement is that 15 to 20 minute mark max. And then we even are starting to do little tidbits. So that's one of the things that we're implementing upcoming with BizBash. If you look in Tampa, is I've done all these 10 in 10 minutes, and we're honing in and we're training the speakers. How do you find, you know, 10 deliverables, takeaways? How do you present that? Quick, fast, to the point. Here's what people need to know. Boom, we're on to the next. You know, people want that different style of learning. You don't want to just sit in a classroom for 60, 90 minutes anymore.
No. Not at all.
Yeah.
Our attention spans aren't like that anymore. We've completely changed our routines, right? Where before we could sit there, but now we're just too antsy. We got to get up. We got to move around.
Yeah, definitely. So my next question was, we kind of already answered it. I was going to ask about kind of the opposite. How do you make the offline attendees feel connected to the virtual attendees? And you said that they are only wanting to chat with one another because we're back in person, and no one really wants to stare at a screen. Have either of you seen hybrid events that have set up kind of chat booths or video booths for offline attendees to correspond with online attendees and have those live meetings? Have you seen that in any of the events you've worked, and how did that go?
Yeah, I mean, we did it at WEC, but we didn't get a lot of engagement between the live in-person audience and the digital audience. I mean, the tools were there, but the in-person audience was just, I guess, too busy. I don't really know. I know I was too busy to engage because I know that I had that on my to-do list as well. You know, if I get a breather, make sure I'm logging in to be able to communicate. But I found myself not able to do that as well. So it's certainly an area for us to grow in.
Definitely.
It's going to change. We talked about that a little bit in the beginning, that right now everyone's just, getting those muscles back, that muscle memory. And when you bring them together, they don't want to turn around and go back to the screen. I saw the ones at MPI, and I'd been pitched those from companies saying, hey, put these into your events as well. And I think in theory, on paper, and I think long term, they'll have a good place for it. But we're all still just so excited to be there right now that they're not taking advantage of it. I do think that will be our long term, that you'll see people, because it'll be our norm to be together again.
It's just a new concept, right? You haven't had to engage with anyone except for the people that were surrounding you in a live room. So again, it is that changing that pattern to make sure that you are engaging with those audiences. And maybe it's an opportunity where we set up a lounge that, you just go into that lounge and like a virtual concierge type of thing, and get a virtual monitor or virtual person to kind of start that conversation between the two audiences. Maybe that's an opportunity.
Yeah. There's always more opportunities on that side, and I keep watching. And a fun fact, so we make sure that we have the app, and I know WEC had the app available to everybody so that you could be watching on demand at the same time. And when we ran the metrics of it, the number of people that were there in person, in real life, on site, but they were sitting outside of the education room, yet still streaming the content, they just wanted to be together, not sitting in front of that stage. It's so different than what this was in years past, and how we have to now accommodate that. But we're watching, we're seeing what these patterns are in human behavior, and we're adjusting. But, seeing 400 people at our event that streamed in basically from the pool because they all wanted to be together, but they still wanted to hear it. It's so different than what we've done in years past.
Yeah. And for planners, that offers a different dynamic, right? Because then your rooms may not look full, right? So how are you mitigating against that? And from a seating standpoint, and we had that at WEC, we had rooms that were almost empty, but when you look at who actually watched the stream or who actually participated, it was more people than we had on the digital audience. So it's really interesting to see what that dynamic is.
Mm-hmm.
Really fun people watching as part of our research over the next year and a half. Very cool. Very cool. Thank you. So I think I wanted to ask some questions about promotion as well, because I know that's a big part of our jobs as event professionals, is to promote our events. So I wanted to ask, how did you encourage attendees to share their experiences on social media leading up to and during the event, at any of the events that you were a part of? So Kate, I'll ask you first.
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest part is meet you where you are. People will want to spread that message if they feel like you're speaking their language to them. So we provide them every opportunity, from the different hashtags, making sure they've got all the different shareable links to get all that information out there, anywhere you can drop that in. And then all the different software that's out there where you can get, different pictures or things that they'll automatically push on that side. We're adding all of those elements so that it is one click. It is easier for people on that side. So really getting the story out there. I mean, that's any event, past, present, or future. It's controlling that narrative, telling that story, and making them feel like they're part of it. They have a piece of it, and they'll help to push that out for you.
Yeah, we call them influencers. They're part of our direct marketing plan. They're in our marketing flight plan as we go out, and we incentivize them with possibly, free registration to WEC or whatever it looks like for them, and get them sharing and talking about it. You'll see that we produce a lot of videos associated with it. So a lot of our high name speakers, this year in Vegas, we had Donny Osmond, for those of you who don't know who he is. But we had some Vegas folks welcoming our group back, because we were the first industry event to happen in Vegas at the time. So it's, it's leveraging all those partnerships. Court, for example, the furniture company, did a whole press conference associated with their integration into what we were trying to do for WEC. So think outside the box, get those people, get your own employees to like and share your post on Facebook and LinkedIn and all of those kinds of things. Because if you're doing it, that influence is just getting larger and larger. We actually had, and I hope Melissa is on this, but we had someone reach out to us while we were doing our GMID presentation back in April, who said, hey, I'm one of those meeting professionals who are out of work. Do you take on interns, or can we work with you? Now she's a director level meeting professional, and we were so fortunate to be able to have her come and work with us at WEC. Take advantage of those types of things. That's how you're going to get that loyalty and that grow your family type of thing. And Melissa will forever be a part of the MPI family now.
I love that.
Wonderful.
That's great to use the influencer side, because I feel like so many people ruined that word for us by taking advantage on that piece. But when you find those true rainmakers in the industry, that they carry that clout and you make sure they fall under your umbrella, that really is the key to it. I feel like I've made it my mission this year to figure out what that word is that's not influencer, because I hate when anyone says
I know it has become a bad connotation, right? And we're so fortunate at MPI to also have chapters, and so we build an entire toolkit for them for their marketing, so they don't have to create anything. All they have to do is just use the toolkits associated with marketing. So again, it's just finding where that influence point is, and those touch points, and taking advantage of that and working that into your marketing flight plan. What we've learned is follow the data. So we know that about 14 days out, if you're planning on participating digitally, that's when you're going to register to participate digitally. And I don't want to miss this point, and we haven't really talked about it, but talking about the life of that digital event or that hybrid event, that hybrid event has a life beyond the day televised. Purpose that and set it's additional revenue opportunity, it's additional exposure for your sponsors. It can have a life beyond the actual dates of your program, so utilize that to your advantage as well.
Absolutely. Well, we have a little bit less than 4 minutes left. I want to remind everyone in the audience that we will be doing a live audience Q&A with our panelists in the workshop session at 3:40 p.m. Eastern time. So once this session ends at 3:40, just hop over into the next session and you'll be able to ask Melinda and Kate your questions live, face to face. I know we also have some questions in the chat. You can feel more than free to ask your questions in the chat in that workshop as well after the fact. You don't have to jump on camera if you're not comfortable with that. But we'll be doing our Q&A at 3:40 over in that session. One last question for both of you, and I'll start with Melinda this time. After your experiences at these these hybrid events over the last year or so, what adjustments are you making? What major adjustments are you making to the hybrid events that you're currently planning for the future?
Major adjustments. We're actually asking ourselves, is hybrid still the way to go for our signature events? We know we're going to do that for our EMEC event. That is our European event that's happening in Brighton at the end of February, 1st of March of next year, because the European community is still so segmented into how they are reacting to coronavirus and the opening of borders and things. So we know we're going to be hybrid for that particular event. When we get to June of next year, I think it's 21 to 23 in San Francisco, we're kind of debating that at this point. We're actually going to have a big debate about it next week to really see what it is that we're going to do. We continue to look at it from a perspective of return on investment. It's the bottom line. It's a huge investment for us to be able to do that in a hybrid manner. And should we be doing that? Is there a good return on investment for us in the beginning? And then we just have to kind of figure out what's, I think we'll plan for hybrid. in the beginning because that's easier than adding it on in the end. So I think that we'll begin down the road with hybrid, but I'm not going to sit here and promise that it will be hybrid when we go into San Francisco, because we'll again have to reevaluate what's happening in the world, by the end of this year, and certainly the first of next year. We'll continue to look at what's happening with this new variant and any other variants that may show up, and make that determination as we move forward. But certainly it's easier to plan for it now than later.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kate, what about you?
Oh, completely agreed. We're looking at, is it still the way to go, or do you, have a in real life that you knock out of the park and a virtual that you knock out of the park, and you keep them separate, or do we keep building the bridge? We're looking at bridging it all now, but it might change. And like Melinda said, we're going to plan for that. And where we're hosting the events, where it was in years past isn't going to be where it is in the future at times. We're looking at alternative options for how and where you host on those pieces, and how we just get everyone involved. I just want to, that whole piece, when we came up with that tagline before Las Vegas, to meet you where you are, I truly believe in that side of it. Wherever you're comfortable with, we're good with, we're going to provide you with what you need to be successful. And at the end of the day, if we can bring you together and help you get actual business out of this, then we're doing our job. So if you're walking away with signed contracts, paper in hand, and we're driving business forward, then we've done our jobs right. We'll just need to keep adjusting.
Definitely. That seems to be the theme of the whole day today, is we're just adjusting and learning as we move forward, which is why our industry is so exciting right now. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. We're not finished yet. We're going to jump into the next session where you'll be able to actually turn your camera and mic on if you'd like, and ask Kate and Melinda your questions face to face. So if you have any issues, make sure you just type in the chat. Our team will help you out. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next session.